This is great. Really excited.
Yeah, happy to. You put the right amount of effort into your Chat GPT responses that day.
Let's build a power app, a marvel to behold.
Darren has earned it. So
PowerApps, coming from a developer background, there was a lot of stuff I wanted to do and it just wouldn't work. Like textbox.text equals something. And I'm like, why doesn't that work?
Yep.
I affectionately was calling you the granddaddy of PowerApps. You've been doing it for quite a few years now, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's a wrong parallel there. It's, I don't even know when I started, quite frankly.
You go way back with SharePoint around 2003 or so, and you were involved in some of those Rocks books, those big 1,200 page Rocks books. You got some back there?
I think that's the last one I did. So yeah, 800 pages.
That'd probably be a good cover for a Copilot book.
Actually, I think the image I used for my Copilot video was very similar to that one, actually. So,
yeah. About 2005, there was this .NET Nuke project out there. It was open source. I started back in the industry with VB6 back before year 2000. All the COBOL programmers were going crazy about the Y2K stuff. So My first programming class was COBOL, and I was in there in the labs. I'm like, what's going on with all these function keys and these black screens? And there was this girl working beside me in the community college. She was working on Visual Basic 4. I'm like, what's that? I want to do that,
And you waited the right time. So I started, QBasic was the first one I used. But then in college, my first college was like a C class.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not.
Yeah, C was a little too much. Pointers and yeah.
Yes, I ended up switching majors to more of a IT and got out of that hardcore computer science stuff. I was not cut out for C. Visual stuff was just came just a little bit too late for me. You had some ideas. Whatever you want to talk about for however long you want to talk, I am
okay. Honored to have this opportunity with you, man. How did you get into PowerApps?
Yeah, it's a good story. But so one of the guys that I wrote one of those books for, I realize I can't see the books, but one of the search book I wrote on SharePoint, I wrote it with Richard Riley and this other guy. And so Richard Riley was at Microsoft. He was, a PM of this or that for the search way back then, SharePoint. So Rich and I became friends over the years. Then I didn't talk to him for a long time. And I was at I think they were still called Tech Eds. I don't know if it was either Tech Ed or right when they changed the name to Ignite. But I was at one of those events I ran into him. I'm like, hey, what have you been up to? He's like, well, I just joined this PowerApps team. I'm like, I'm bored. I'm in. And I literally just went in. There was no deep thought. There was no.
Wow, that's cool.
Dove in because of Richard. Because at the time I'd been making a lot of PowerShell content.
Yeah, I saw that your early days are doing PowerShell.
Yeah, so there's a PowerShell video out there. It has almost 2 million views that I did.
That's wild, man.
But the problem, so I could get views, but no one wanted to pay for anything. PowerShell people refused to open up their checkbooks. And so it wasn't sustainable long term. And so I was just in the right spot at the right time. And he said PowerApps. I'm like, okay. So that's always a good story for the viewers. So
I know myself, I was working at Florida Department of Transportation, and they asked me, well, you want to check it out and see if it's viable? I'm like, absolutely. And my first app was absolutely horrid. Yeah, I really fell in love with it. And, my first concern, Shane, was, is this some type of a toy language or something like? And I started to worry. I had 20 years experience as a .NET developer. I'm like, I love this stuff so much. Can I see myself actually, sustaining a career on it? And it just seems like there's such a high demand and a low supply of people that can write apps in PowerApps. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, definitely. The finding people is one of the hardest challenges, as PowerApps 911 right now. I think we're currently starting new work, a couple months out, and we're just, we're just trying to keep up. We're hiring. We've got a bunch of new people coming on very soon, but it's, you gotta have to, so yes, it's hard to find people. And then I think at the same time, you have to not overzealous, try to just get so caught up in the need to find people that you lower the bar. So finding good people, right? Finding people is hard enough. Finding people that are talented, now you're really getting out there. So yes, finding people's hard.
And then something else I notice is when I work with companies, the IT departments really struggle with governance, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't. A lot of the guys in IT, they don't like it. They're like, what's all this citizen developer stuff? And heck no, we're not going to open that up. And what do you think you're doing? And they're worried about shadow IT and that type of stuff. Have you seen that in a lot of cases when you work with companies?
Yeah, I yell at IT folks all the time, right? I used to be an IT guy, right? And first day of IT school, what do they teach you? They teach you to say no, right? Like it's literally day one. And and you just that's not the world we live in today. You can't just say no. And so one of the ways that I try to equate it for the IT folks is always, the same way that we don't want to govern spreadsheets, right? We don't govern them using Excel. Why are we governing them building their own apps to replace an Excel spreadsheet? Like, why? If you want to govern and put policies and procedures around grandiose things that affect the whole enterprise that are, mission critical, great, let's do that. But the average app that, Susie or Johnny is making over in accounting, just leave them alone.
I even get tired of it working in IT is the IT department telling me about stuff, or the DBA's like, hey man, like give me access to the dev database, please. Like, do you really need access for that? And I'm like, it's dev. Like,
what am I going to hurt? Right. I think one of the things that we've learned over the last umpteen years is, users will always pick the path of least resistance. So, if you lock them out of PowerApps, you're going to make it really hard. They're just going to go get some other third-party low-code, no-code tool to do it that you can't manage. And then you have zero insight, right? So you could leave them in PowerApps where you could put COE in place and watch and monitor and control what you needed to, or you can just put up a big brick wall and they'll just go build something else. Like it's not rocket science at this point. It's not shocking anymore. So just calm down, help them do it.
Hey, if you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel, and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
We're just on the upslope of a huge bell curve, right, with the Power Platform.
Yeah, and I try to, right, like that's another important thing to remember is that, you and me, we've been doing this for 5, 6, whatever years already, right? And it's like, oh my goodness, this thing's old. It's everyone can do this now. And no, right? We are still in very early days. 20% of people that are going to potentially do this are maybe doing it right now. So it's still in the up. It's still plenty of time for you to jump in and become good at this and make a career out of it, right? Like it's not like we're at the top and it's on its way out. Like we are still very early days, even if we've been doing it for several years already.
I don't know, like 70% of apps in the next few years are going to be low code, no code applications. And of course, with all this AI stuff going on, gee whiz, and Copilot.
Yeah, and if you think about like Copilot, like especially what's there right now, right? Like what is its main job? It is to lower the bar of entry, right? We want more people building, more people doing. But at the same time, right, it's not like they're replacing you, right? You have a traditional dev background. It's easy for you to be like, man, this low code stuff's going to take my job, right? But no, your pro dev skills, they have a place here, right? It's building that next level. It's taking that app that was just used by the accounting department and adding those functionalities so it can truly be a larger scale app, right? Or it's it's creating custom connectors, it's creating PCF controls, it's interacting with APIs. It's doing that next tier of hard stuff, but not just one off, trying to find ways to do that so that you empower more people to make true low code apps, right? And that's where I think devs get lost a lot of times is they're like, this is just, did you really want a job coding forms by hand in C# or whatever? No. So why are you upset that people are doing this? Bring more value to this conversation.
Yeah, I think there's an underlying sort of fear that will be replaced, or somebody will come along, and especially with that AI sort of getting better and better, that I asked Chat GPT, it's like, hey, build me a content management system in PHP. And it just gave me block of code. And I don't know PHP. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things. So, learning's a key right now, right? So, because once again, you can get on the crazy train and be like, AI is going to take my job.
Yeah.
Right. And I say it all the time. Like, this has become my catchphrase. I'm going to get a tattoo of it. But AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI is going to take your job. So be the someone using AI, right? Like, if you're not using Chat GPT every single day of your life right now, you just don't want to be successful. I don't know how else to. Yay, Chat GPT.
Yeah. And then some people like, I don't have any interest in that. I don't see any use in that.
And that's the challenge, right? You've got to get everyone to have their aha moments. Because once they do, right, like they can't see life without it again. Both of my kids play very competitive, high level, like MLS Next type soccer, right? Like we do a lot of soccer. But so I was talking to one of the directors the other day, and he's like, hey, I need to do like some research on this really obscure like club formation stuff, right? Like, I'm not getting into his details, but this really bizarre topic, right? And he's like, I want to, like, we have opinions, but I want facts. And I'm like, oh, I don't have any facts either. So what I did though is I went and asked ChatGPT, like I spelled it out. I'm like, hey, I run a soccer club, and I kind of described the club. And then I said, hey, and here's all of, our goals as a club. And then here's how we currently like lay out teams. And then here's my stupid question, right? Like this weird, obscure thing, right? And just like that, it spit back a response. And it's like, well, here's the answer, right? You should do this alignment stuff, all this detail. I'm like, all right, what's your justification? Oh, here's all the research papers that I read that, don't answer this directly, but they support this argument because no one's done a research paper on this specific question. But it was literally, not exaggerating, like I had spent 6 months reading every academic paper ever on team formations and then condensed it down into a 2,000 word paragraph. Like literally something I could have not done in less than months of my life, if ever, if I really wanted this detailed answer. And I got it, all the back and forth, because then I sent it to this guy and he's like, oh, well, what if my parameters for our goals are this? Fed it in there, like literally less than 10 minutes of work on my part. I don't even understand.
One of my least favorite parts of being a software developer is trying to pull out all the requirements out of the stakeholders or the end users. And a lot of times I'll go back if there's meeting after meeting and it's like, okay, well, I need an app that does this. I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot more stuff to go over. We need to unpack all this, And now I've started to use ChatGPT and I'm like, okay, so they say they need an app that does this. You're an expert software architect that's a master of gathering requirements. Give me questions to ask them that will pull out all the rest of the requirements out of this for this industry. And it gives me stuff that I didn't even think of asking. And I look over it just to make sure that it's all legit stuff, that it's not making a mistake. But I just paste over those questions and they're like, wow, those are good questions. And they come back and I just paste things back and forth. Now that would have taken me hours and hours and sitting there thinking and sort of like walking through like what they need. And oh my goodness, it saves me so much time. And what's wild is at the end of this, let's say for freelancing work, I'll say, okay, ChatGPT, give me a listing of all the screens that an app that's built in PowerApps would need for this. Okay, here's and what are all the database tables you think I should have for this? So now that's stuff I would always do myself, but I would spend hours to it. And then I'm like, okay, now give me a full proposal, paste that in Word, save it as a PDF, send it over there. And the potential clients are like, wow, this is so thorough and so professional. And I'm like, thanks, ChatGPT. Hey, here's your $20.
Yeah. Right. I mean, this is the key, right? If you're sitting on there watching this right now and you're a business analyst, right? Like ChatGPT is not going to take your business analyst job. Darren using Chat GPT though could take your business analyst job, right? He just showed you how, instead of days of work, minutes, half an hour you spent,
But I feel like it impressed it more than what if I would have spent hours typing it up all on my own, Yeah. So and comes up with some ideas for screens that I wouldn't have thought of either. So I just can't imagine people not really embracing this and utilizing it.
But they're not. So you just keep creating your advantage by All right, so we were talking about hiring earlier. The offer letter that we sent out yesterday. Yep, I had Chat GPT write it.
That's awesome.
Right, mostly just so I could say, we kind of have a boilerplate, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell Chat GPT what I want to do, and why not?
If anything else, it like gives you a good starting point. Sometimes I've thrown in a few topics, like for a YouTube video idea. Hey, this is the topic I want to cover. Give me an outline of things and it gives me ideas. Yeah. So, one of the topics was how to supercharge our life. So you had a thread out there on Twitter, and tell the viewers a little bit about what you were doing, what made you think of this. You were, thinking about how often you see stuff about Chat GPT, all these outlandish things like how to make $1,000 an hour.
Yeah, that's that is one of the downsides, I think, of Chat GPT. If you're into it, my Twitter thread is probably 50% Chat GPT or AI type of content. And at this point though, and there must be a million people that are literally they write the same thread over and over again, right? Or 10 prompts that will change your life. 17 ways to make $1,000 today with Chat GPT. Like they just have the same thing.
Yeah.
And so to your point, what did I do? Because I opened Twitter as bored, as doom scrolling, right? And like the first 5 tweets that I read were all the same thing, right? They were all the same, make $1 million. And so I was like, this is stupid. And watch how easy this is. And I just showed people how to write their own. Like I enabled another 1 million people to do this because I showed them how easy it was to say, hey, Chat GPT, write me a Twitter thread that talks about the top 10 tips for talking to my dog or something ridiculous like that. Which I keep looking down because he's currently sleeping literally under my feet. I keep stepping on him.
As you know, any dogs that are 30 pounds and under are basically cats, right?
Yes. Agree. Buddy's pushing 65. Chewy was 110. Chewy was a load.
What do you think about PowerApps always changing? I'm in the PowerApps environment, and it just drives me nuts. Like I want to do a fill, and I type in white. I'm always used to, and now it's like, nope, white's not good enough. You got to say color.white, which I think was always there, but it's like, man, I didn't, and maybe I should have got the memo or the blog where Microsoft says, oh, by the way, we're doing this,
There was no blog. Yeah. So yeah, color used to be inferred and they quit inferring that. And yeah, right. And people like us have been doing it a long time, right? We got muscle memory, right? It's, comma white and now it airs like, color dot. No, the constant change in PowerApps it's a challenge. Especially as people who make content, right? Like constantly our content is out of date and it's really tough. Because we've got all that on-demand training. And so every time that Microsoft decides to, change the homepage or change the UI, just a little tweak here, everything's out of date. Even though the concepts are exactly the same, it looks different, and that causes so much confusion.
It does. I mean, they changed the menu just a few months ago, and it's like I'm used to going into it was like actions or something right there. I was able to get to like the event type of properties really quickly, like for a button or something. And now I gotta like go over to advanced and find it over there. Or yeah, it's a little annoying. Something that I came across that really freaked me out. I started a new project, and maybe this hasn't started happening in the projects that were started, weeks or months before this. But I went to the app object. I'm like, okay, run on start, and it was gone. I started looking into it, and it's like they're trying to get us away from stop using the App.OnStart.
You're right. Like they rolled out Start Screen, like yay! But really, Start Screen doesn't do much today, right? I mean, you can determine your screen, but you can't set variables or anything in there, so it's very limited. So we still use App.OnStart. They don't want us to, but we still do. And one of the challenges, but the reason they don't want us to use App.OnStart, just full picture, is in the real world, they see a lot of apps that have really long load times, right? So people are like, PowerApps are slow. In reality, what it is it's that PowerApp is doing tons of work in the App.OnStart, which causes the app to wait to load. So people blame PowerApp's slowness on PowerApps instead of all the code they put in OnStart. So that's why they're trying to get away from it. But to really truly get the code out of App.OnStart, we need some more like the named formulas and some more of those pieces to go GA and to kind of, fall into place properly before we can get rid of it. I mean, so today I still just teach people do it the old way. Use OnStart. We're going to stick there. Maybe in a few more months when they get everything kind of shuffled out, maybe a few more years, who knows? Then we'll reevaluate. But today, let's use OnStart.
What do you think about the future of PowerApps, where you see it's going, and I'll have to pick your brain about that.
I mean, so there's a couple of themes that you'll see. It was medium term, right? Like I think you're going to continue to see the bar being lowered, right? Like we talked about with Copilot already, how that's pulling the bar down. I think you'll continue to see more and more investments there to make it more approachable for someone to begin with. I think the other big thing that you'll continue to see is convergence, right? So that's what we call today we got Canvas app and model driven apps, and it's kind of confusing for people, like which one should I use? That causes a lot of consternation that probably isn't necessary. And so you'll just continue to see them try to meld those. So one day it'll be one product. But they've been doing that for a few years, and I think that it's probably still a few more years out. But this last round of model-driven changes, when they incorporated custom pages, which are just Canvas apps, right? Like that was a big leap forward, right? Like that was showing the two coexisting in one app. And then it's just going to kind of continue to get fuzzier, but probably not in any rapid way, just slowly over time. So I think those are my two biggest things. I think the other really important message is I definitely, clearly I have a company called PowerApps 911. I'm all in, but yeah. I think I still, to our earlier conversation, we're still early days. This thing is still doing this as far as growth goes. And I don't see that slowing down. Office 365 just has such a strong, or Microsoft 365 now, whatever we call it this week, right? But it has such a large corporate footprint, yeah. And we're just kind of riding that wave. I don't sit here and go, oh man, someone's going to launch another low-code tool and replace PowerApps tomorrow. I just don't see it. This game's over already as far as PowerApps is one.
Yeah. Have you messed around with any other low-code, no-code type of platforms?
Not much. We've had some customers who've wanted to get off of other platforms and get to PowerApps. And so a couple of times I've had to see what they've built or kind of doink around in these other tools, but I don't have any tangible, I don't have any real knowledge in any of those. And I think one of the things that's always been weird about us, we don't sell PowerApps, right? That's not my job. We will help you build them, do all the things on them once you get there or get here, but we are not going to help you figure out, should you buy PowerApps or buy some weird third-party tool? That's on you. Once you decide PowerApps, we got your back. But, and I guess that's always just been a nice place to be. I guess it's convenience, right? That I don't have to go understand the larger market. I don't have to justify the platform. I'm just here to help you build your dreams.
Yeah, it seems like by the time people get to me, they're already sold on PowerApps, so I don't have to try to go over anything. Sometimes I go over, do you understand the limitations? And I wish someday that PowerApps, you could write a PowerApps application that would interface with external users, which I guess we sort of have with the portals or the new branded Power Pages, but it's not the same. I sort of hope that eventually we'd be able to make the Power Pages, the portals, as easily as we can with the Canvas apps or the model driven.
Yeah, well, we've done some Canvas apps that have external sharing, so they are sharing them with people outside their org. But I think to your point, right? Like all those people have to be authenticated named users, right? Like you're not just opening a Power App, dropping a Power App in the App Store and running with it, right?
So what other types of ways are you integrating Chat GPT in your Power Apps development?
For me, it's a lot of it is, well, so like the video that I'm putting out next Monday, which I realize is the past Monday when you guys are seeing this, but whatever. But my next video, so I needed to make a bunch of sample data. It's about it's using Power Apps instead of Power BI. Shh. It's gonna make some people angry. But so it's just one of those things, like you just have to think of it. But as soon as I was like, wait a minute, hey, Chat GPT, here's the columns, make me sample data for these 3 different regions, using these proportions. Like I gave it just some high level stuff. And then 10 seconds later, here's thousands of, faked rows of data that enable me to build out the scenario. And, there's so many of those type of things that I don't think people are thinking about. Like, just ask it the questions, see if it can do what you want, because it probably can.
Yeah.
Right. What's your favorite use of it right now? What do you like? What tricky thing are you doing with it?
To be honest, gathering the requirements, I feel like as an app developer, just bringing sort of order to people's chaos, that they never want to give you written documentation. They just want to meet with you. And it's like diarrhea of the mouth. It's like, blah, 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 I need that. Blah, 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 and they're expecting to take all these notes and everything. And that whole thing that I talked to you about, like going back and forth with the requirements. Oh my goodness. I love that. That is just so worth it. Beyond that, just, I have 1 or 2 videos out there where I brought up Chat GPT and I said, hey, give me an app for an idea, and give me an idea for a Power Apps application to build. And it was like employee recognition. I'm like, okay, well, let me just build a whole live stream out of this. I'll just bring up this prompt and the response. And I was like, okay, guys, let's just see what it can do for us. And it was sort of cool. I think maybe that you and I are in agreement that we don't like forms all that much. Is that?
Hate forms.
I hate it. And once I came across Patch, it's like, oh, okay. That's when it really started to click for me. Before I was trying to get everything to go through the form, and I spent so many hours, and then it would be sad. And I just don't understand how, a lot of people use forms. Some seasoned people, they use forms. And I'm like, oh man. So we're 100% in agreement on that, I think. Yeah. And I was going back and forth in this session, and it wanted me to use forms. Like, I don't want to use forms. Tell me something else.
Individual controls, buddy. Individual controls.
Yeah. Do you get people sort of push back on you for, well, since you're not using a form, what are you going to do for data validation? What are you going to do for, all these things that the form takes care of you?
People ask about it. And so actually last week's video was all about doing validation, like you have in forms, but using Patch. And I think that, it's just another skill that you've just got to develop. It's more work, right? Because the form does it for free, but I didn't completely control it. And so not only is it things like, is this required or not, but you start to figure out things like, well, I've got an age column, and maybe I can only take people that are over 18. So I can do, validation. Not only is it blank, which is all that the form really would have done, right? But they can also validate, and it's greater than 18. If it's not, reset the control and tell them, do a pop-up and say, hey, this person's not 18, or match an email, but actually use like is match incorporated in there as well, so that you can, validate that it's actually, Shane at PowerApps911.com, right? Like it's a valid format. And I think that's the thing to remember, right? So, forms do validation. And if you want to do exactly the same level of validation as forms with Patch, it's probably more work, not gonna lie. But if you want to go that next step and start to actually build a good UX, good user experience, forms, you're kind of stuck, right? Patch opens a window to you doing bigger, better, more controlled, more validations that are specific instead of generic. And I think that's always been our selling point, right? That's why you and I love Patch so much, is because it gives us more control. It can be more work, but it can also create much better outcomes.
Yeah, when I would write my first few apps, I started to use Patch, and I'm like, eventually I was just ripping it out and replacing. It's like, well, let me just get away from forms altogether and not even mess with that. I know with a lot of times when very quickly an app starts to get a little complex, where you want something beyond what the form just gives you, and you're trying, let's say, like, there's a rating, you have a rating of 1 to 5, and so it's a numeric, so it gives you a text box to type in a numeric value of 1 to 5. And what's to keep them from hitting 9? So you might, I want a rating control in there, so you like put that in there, maybe make the text box invisible. And what I've found is you got to do all these workarounds, even if you like the forms. Yeah, it's sort of interesting that when I hear people sort of defend forms, well, somebody mentioned, well, if you've got 100 columns, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'll use a form if you got 100 columns in the table. I'm not gonna.
But if you have 100 columns in the table, your table's probably wrong, right? Like,
yeah,
you got it here wrong. Because let's be honest, from a user experience point of view, who the heck wants to open up a screen and be like, look, there's 100 fields that I have to click in before I hit submit? Like, that's a terrible user experience. So
it is absolutely.
Oh, my screen just went blank. What happened here? Oh, I'm back. I have no idea what happened. Hi. It was a terrible user experience, and then speaking of terrible user experiences, my screen all went black in the middle of the talk.
Yeah. What advice would you give for absolutely beginners in PowerApps?
Build something. What I always tell those people, I get to talk to thousands of those every year, is, you've probably got some business process today that is facilitated in an Excel spreadsheet or email workflow. You've got a business process today. Your first app should be to replicate that business process as an app. And you're like, but that doesn't get me anything new. It doesn't. But one of the key things there is, if you've solved the business problem, all right, because you've got a working business solution, then you can just concentrate on learning the tech, right? Often people are like, hey, my first Power App is going to be this new business process that we just made up that we haven't worked out the kinks of, and I'm going to learn Power Apps at the same time, and it's about 400,000 screens of content, right? There's no chance they're going to be successful, because they're trying to learn the tech, make up a business process, and their eyes were just too big, right? Whereas if they just take a small little simple thing and figure out how to replicate that over here, yay, now that app works. Now you've got some Power App skills. Now you kind of understand. Now you maybe expand it. Maybe you go take on something bigger. But that first app needs to be an already solved process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's so, because I had this challenge, right? You've got more of a pro dev background than me, so obviously means you're smarter than me, but means I'm better looking.
I don't know.
Kind of how it works. But one of the things, so I had to learn PowerShell, right? So me and Todd showed up in Redmond in, I don't remember the year, let's call it like 2005. I don't know. And basically we went there to talk to the SharePoint team, and the SharePoint team's like, good news, we're, instead of command prompt, we're going to use PowerShell. We're like, what in the heck is PowerShell? Like we were scared and angry and confused. But,
yeah.
Right. But it was the same thing. I had to learn PowerShell. I had to learn it in a hurry. I had to go teach other people how to use it. And so what did I do? I was like, all right, I knew how to go into Central Admin and create a site collection, right? Like I go here, I do this, I provide this information, and I hit create. Okay, I could do it there. Or I open up PowerShell. I'm like, all right, how do you create a site collection in PowerShell? And I figured it out because I already knew the answers. I knew the process. I just needed to figure out how to do it in a different tool. And that is literally how I learned PowerShell, was just by doing things I already knew how to do in the new tool. So I didn't have to solve as many problems.
Like that. Yeah. Absolutely. I know when you learn something new, you always need to sort of relate it to other knowledge that you have. And that's what I try to do with powers of like, I just want to say textbox.text equals something.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that. It's like, man, if I could just figure that out, so there's always a piece of that, relating it to what you're already doing. So starting off with something small and, some business process that you're already familiar with, that's, really good advice. I like that.
Yeah. I don't envy you and having to go from, imperative to declarative type of logic and trying to understand. But yeah, it's a common stumbling point for developers. So probably a good video for you to make, right? I'm not sure I'm qualified, but I think that would be a great video for you to put out there as, so I'm a dev and I want to go use this thing, right? Like and call it like declarative versus imperative. Your average person's not gonna know what it is, but the people that do know what that is, I think would really love you for bridging that gap in a way like that.
Absolutely, man. You're giving me gold here. I like it.
Yeah, I always want to shout out on the video, but no, I'm just kidding. But no, I think that's it is, because everyone comes to this with a different preconceived notion of how to do things. That's a major stumbling block for a lot of really smart people, because they can't say text box equals, blah.
Do you have any funny or interesting stories from your experience with PowerApps?
Funny or interesting? I have so many. I don't know. You've never first asked this. Funny or interesting stories with PowerApps? All right, how about this one? So probably 3 years ago, I was at a conference, and so I was getting ready to do one of my talks, and at that point, YouTube, I was fairly well known in the to the people in that conference already. And so before the talk, guy comes up and he's like, haha, you're the guy that makes really ugly apps, right? Because if you've ever watched my videos, I typically don't worry about design. I'm always trying to teach people mechanics, right? Especially back then. It was like, hey, this is how these two things work. You make them pretty. I want to make sure you understand how this works.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it is what it is. He's like, let me show you this app that I built, right? And so he opens up his phone, and after like 2 minutes, this app opens up, and he's like, look at these screens. They've all got like, shiny graphics and animation, or not animations at that point, but like shiny backgrounds. All the buttons have been replaced with images. Like it looked really, really pretty. Mm-hmm. Not gonna lie. I'm like, oh, awesome, dude. Right? Congratulations, good job. Yay. He's like, I know, it's pretty cool. I'm like, it is. And he's like, but while I've got you, I've got a question. I'm like, all right, I like questions. He goes, my app's really slow. Why is my app really slow? I was like, like the answer to this. But he had like 150 megs worth of image files in there because everything had been made to be beautiful, right? And so he fell for the trap of, he spent 80% of his effort making this app beautiful and 20% of the effort on functionality, whereas I'm a 95% functionality and 5% pretty. But so I had to have that awkward conversation with him, like, look, you've got to peel out all this crap. Right? There's just no two ways about it. Right? You're asking your poor little cell phone on this little 4G network to pull down 150 megs worth of image files to render your app, and it's just not a good idea. So I thought that was kind of fun, right? Because the conversation went full circle from your apps are crap to, well, your app is beautiful, but it's actually crap because it doesn't work with it. Oh, there you go. I've never told that story before, so oops.
That's all that I had prepared. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been an absolute pleasure. You seem to have like a very approachable, nice personality type, man. I really like that about you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I try. I get to do lots of fun stuff, and I guess one of the crazy things about me is that crazy guy that you watch on YouTube that is all animated and excited and screws up and makes funny faces. That's me, right? It's not an act. I am I am that person, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I love that about you. Sometimes people, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but a lot of people are like really serious, and you're working in the business, you write an app. Yeah, this is serious, a little tedious, but to have a little bit of animation and some real personality in there, it really adds value to it. And I think it keeps people engaged and watching.
I'm with you, man. I mean, this stuff at the end of the day is boring, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about ones and zeros, moving stuff around, inventory apps and production. Like it could be real easy to be boring and dry. So adding a little levity that, I don't want to get off on a 5-minute comedy sketch, but just bring in there. Another thing I'll add for you there is, so like when I first started making videos, I would try to, keep things as tight as humanly possible, right? Like, so if I was doing something I screwed up, I basically would cut it all out, and make it so every demo was just picture perfect walk through the woods.
Yeah.
And I started sprinkling in screw ups, and it turns out that people learn more and are more engaged when I mess up, right? Because no one's going to watch my video and replicate it one for one and get it right on their first try too. They're going to make mistakes. And so I don't make mistakes on purpose typically, but by leaving my mistakes in there, it's a better learning opportunity sometimes than I just built this thing perfectly on the first try.
Absolutely. I think people can get this false notion, either coding or doing what we do in PowerApps, and they see a polished video, and the first sign of trouble, it's like, oh, maybe I'm not made for this. Where people like you and me, we're trying to do something simple, like I'm just trying to type white in there, and it's so. Yeah. And they see that, and I noticed this when I started doing live streams. I'm like, nobody's gonna want to see me fumble around when something's not working right. But I got that feedback that you just said, is that they really like the fact that to see me, not only that it happens to me, but how did I go about it to sort of troubleshoot it?
Yeah, because I mean, troubleshooting requires deeper knowledge about what's happening, why it's happening, what this thing expects. And that's when you mess up, it gives you the opportunity to be like, whoa, I mean, think about this. This thing wants a color. It's yelling at me. Well, what is this? Oh, this isn't a color object. How do I get a color? That's kind of how all the mechanics that go into you realizing you need to go from white to color.white. And it's real easy to be like, everyone knows that. No one knows that, right? That's the value you bring by showing that particular mistake.
If you ever want to do something like this again, I'm definitely up for it. Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Guys, for some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry. Click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want. Thanks.